we're going to go in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to a new edition of Improving's Lunch and Learn series. My name is Mark Kovacevich. I am the president of North American Enterprises for Improving, and I want to talk to you a little bit about conscious capitalism. But first, before I do that, just a little bit about Improving. We are an IT consulting firm and training organizations. We've got locations throughout North America. We are up to 10 offices. We just recently acquired an organization in Mexico that provides nearshoring, as well as a new organization just joined us within the last 30 days out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, formerly known as Object Partners. So I wanted to welcome both of those enterprises to the organization. Next thing I'd like to do is introduce you to a friend of mine. This is Doug. Doug is who I'm going to be delivering this talk to, because let me tell you, it is really unusual to be doing a virtual talk like this. And honestly, it requires a little bit of getting used to. I'm hoping that I'm able to deliver this with good energy and you guys get some benefit out of it. I'm definitely going to do my best, but it is hard to not be able to see the audience. So in lieu of that, we've got a Q&A chat window, and I've got some technology magicians behind the scenes kind of tracking that. So please, if you have questions, type them directly into that chat window so we can get those answered for you. And please be active in that. The material that's getting presented is a little bit heavy by nature because it is an operationalizing vision of conscious capitalism, so it's kind of hard, and it's real meaty. So some tactical questions and practical applications of applying conscious capitalism are things that will be really, really beneficial. And odds are, if you have that question, so does everybody else. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick things off. So first, I'd like to define a little bit about what conscious capitalism is for those that aren't aware of it. So conscious capitalism seeks to elevate humanity through the power of business. That's their purpose statement, which is quite powerful when you think about it. You know, oftentimes there's a perception that capitalism is bad, that business is bad, and conscious capitalism seeks to challenge that belief by creating an operating model in which businesses can elevate humanity, can do good. You know, business has solved some phenomenal problems and contributed to the success of some very, very large problems, such as, you know, removing individuals from poverty. Right now, it doesn't mean that it's finished. It doesn't mean that it's perfect, but there has been some significant success around that through capitalism and through business lifting individuals up. Conscious capitalism has 4 pillars, and I'm going to go through each of them at an individual level, but at a very high level, there's a purpose, a higher purpose, or a purpose beyond profit, right? And that's really the key, one of the 4 pillars, and probably the most important visible one when you're elevating yourselves to a conscious business. Next one is stakeholder model. And what the stakeholder model is it's the entire ecosystem that exists around the business that the business is both responsible for and accountable to, right? And it doesn't just include shareholders, it includes stakeholders. The next one is conscious leadership, which is how are leaders conscientiously building their business and demonstrating their commitment to being a conscious leader. And finally, conscious culture. How does the culture of the organization support the other pillars? Is it really embedded in it? How do you embed it in it? How can you demonstrate it? What are things that the business can do that shows that the culture is truly there? So taking a little bit of a deeper dive into higher purpose, you know, conscious businesses focus on purpose beyond profit. And a truly great purpose engages all of the stakeholders to a degree. You can't always be perfect, but you can engage. Businesses with a purpose beyond profit tend to be more successful than businesses that are simply profit driven. And finally, people trust organizations that are motivated by a higher cause. Now, at the same time, this makes it a little scary, because if you're not truly committed to your purpose, you can be found out as a fraudulent organization more often than not, right? Oh, you claim that this is your purpose, but really it's just lip service. It looks good on a marketing slick or something like that, and it's that's really not living into your higher purpose. A good successful higher purpose is Southwest Airlines, and their tagline is freedom to move, be free to move about the country. Southwest lives into that purpose countless ways. You know, up until the recent pandemic, where travel has become significantly lessened, I couldn't go at least a couple weeks without hearing in the news about this great thing that a Southwest gate agent did. You know, for example, they've held planes 20 minutes to allow a loved one to make a connection flight, maybe to see someone who is very sick or see the birth of a child. And they give their gate agents the freedom to exercise judgment on those sorts of things that allow them to embrace the community. And it's really a wonderful purpose, right? And the business results of that are spectacular. At one point in time, and this year, you know, obviously COVID caveat, Southwest Airlines was profitable for 20 straight years. It's the only airline to do that. So this is really a great expression of a higher purpose. The next component is stakeholder orientation. You know, conscious businesses recognize the entire ecosystem that they're trying to create value on. When I was in, I graduated from the Ohio State University with a finance degree. Hopefully no one signed off with the mention of Ohio State. A really great school. But as I was going through and, you know, getting my finance degree, it was literally beaten into my head that companies exist to serve their shareholders. And even back then, it rubbed me the wrong way, because, you know, get to thinking, well, what about the employees? You know, what about the environment, their communities, right? What about the employees' families? And it was, you know, I wasn't necessarily thinking of this in great depth, but just even those little tiny points to a stakeholder made me question that whole sentiment around that statement of existing to serve shareholders. So a couple of really good examples of stakeholder models is the one on the left is Campbell's Soup, which has been reinvented over the last couple years. You know, I'm sure most people have the vision of the Rockwell painting in their head, the little can of tomato soup, or maybe they've experienced a can of chicken noodle soup or tomato soup, and it's, you know, it's kind of, you know, you pour out the tomato soup and it comes out in a little clunk, and it certainly doesn't look fresh and healthy. That's for sure. Tasty, I still like it, but definitely not, doesn't speak farm fresh by any stretch of the imagination. So what Campbell's has been doing is they have been redefining their organization through a stakeholder model that is attracting suppliers, it's building communities, it's educating their customers, and they're injecting this new environmentally conscious, sustainable growth model to both business, the environment, and healthy living. And they've been tremendously successful over the past several years. They have developed new sales channels. They've developed new products that are much better for you than some of the things that they had previously done. And it's kind of all encompassing of embracing this stakeholder model to help leverage the distribution of that. Next, we've got conscious leadership. the goal of of leadership in any organization is to align the entire organization around its mission, or in this case, its higher purpose. What I view conscious leadership as, first and foremost, is servant leadership. We at Improving, and this is a near and dear one for me, what we're always trying to do is support individuals, create value for the stakeholders, and really focus on we, not me. Servant leadership, for me, forms the foundation of that. You know, it gives me a sense of purpose, it gives me a higher calling, it gives me the opportunity to allow stakeholders to realize their dreams, to support them, to turn their thoughts and ambitions into a new reality. So this is a very, very powerful concept for me personally. Some of the things that make a conscious leader are your emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, natural analytical intelligence, and some systems intelligence. They kind of all get blended in together with a couple of key words: integrity, love, care, empathy, servant leadership. That to me is what makes a conscious leader, an individual that is both aware of each one of these cues, but lives into them to the best of their ability and is consistently growing in capacity, in capability, in delivering leadership. And then finally, conscious culture. And culture is the guiding principles and practices of business. It's where the interconnection of the people, the purpose, and the process kind of all comes together. And the culture is what defines the experience inside of the business. It's really an internal thing, but in a conscious manner, how does that culture bleed over to the stakeholders? How does it bleed over to the communities? How does it bleed over to the businesses, suppliers? A lot of that is driven by culture. There's a quote about a very famous speaker, whose name, of course, I can't remember right now, but he would always take the time to listen to individuals who would come up to him after his talks. And, you know, they would talk to the people who spoke to him, like, well, what was it like? And their response was, he made me feel like I was the only person in the room. Oftentimes, they didn't even remember what dialogue had been exchanged, but the simple act of focusing on individuals, the simple act of being present in the moment and not distracted, was incredibly powerful. And conscious culture can buoy this throughout the organization, and like I said, spill over into the larger communities. So I have one more slide on this, but I did want to let you know, if you have some questions on this first chunk, we're going to be transitioning into the second chunk, so please go ahead and get those into the Q&A window. So why is it important? Tom Peters said, culture eats strategy for lunch. It's true. Cultural businesses destroy strategy. Culture-driven organizations are really what powers the organization through tough times. We're sitting here in the middle of a pandemic. Everyone's got a strategy until you get punched in the mouth, and that is effectively what has happened to businesses worldwide. Now it's about the culture. How can the company's culture support and move through this very, very disruptive event and come out as a successful business positioned to continue to serve the stakeholders and follow its higher purpose? So once again, conscious capitalism, purpose, culture, leadership, stakeholders. These are the key components of it. So I will take a little pause here for any questions that have come through our trusty producer.
Bentley says go blue. And then we have another OS.
I just want to see a game this year, to be honest. So
we do have a couple questions. James Carpenter asked, what are your thoughts on structural models which reinforce a culture of conscious capitalism? What are your thoughts on the platform cooperative style ownership models?
So that's a great question, and thank you, James. I appreciate that one. That's a challenging one. So from a structural model perspective, I can't, since we can't have a dialogue, I don't know exactly what you mean, but I'm going to take it as, how do you measure it? And to me, that's the real structural model of how do you understand what is actually happening. And for us, we have put in place several metrics that I'll get to a little bit later in this presentation about how we actually try to measure this. Now, of course, for every one thing we measure, there's probably 3 or 4 that we could. But what we've done is we've tried to identify our key performance indicators from a cultural perspective that we really lock into. And the second component about the second part of that question about a distributed ownership model, we live into that. At Improving, we have, gosh, at last count, 55 individual owners of the organization. So that's something that we definitely live into. I believe in it wholeheartedly. There's something outside of conscious capitalism, but it kind of lives into it, that we define as ownership behavior. You know, owning the name, owning the Improving name as you own your own name, because we're all representatives of the organization we work for, and we should be proud of that, and we should own that organization. And also, part of the component of trust is to be able to talk to leaders within the organization respectfully and without fear about when we don't live into our purpose, right? Because that's just as important as celebrating the times that we do.
He kind of goes on to clarify. He says the question boils down to, how does one create a corporate governance structure that doesn't fall apart with the change in senior leadership?
Oof. That's very specific. So I don't know if I don't have a good tactical, practical example like, oh, you should just go ahead and follow these 15 rules and your governance structure is going to be fine. To me, in a change of leadership like that, it's a system shock event, and the culture is going to play a huge role. And gosh, I hope that the board that made that decision for the leadership change really took to heart the organization and the heartbeat of the organization and the inherent purpose of the organization to select a leader that aligned with the culture. The vision can be different, which is completely different. It's fine to have a new vision, a new direction, to recreate or transform a business. I mean, conscious capitalism isn't just like kumbaya, crunchy granola. There's business to it, but it's more about what the ideal outcome is and what the intentions are, and that's really what's going to drive it. I wish I could answer that question better, James. That's a really hard one, and honestly, I hadn't given that serious thought to a question of that serious nature.
All right, we got one more question in this section. I ask, what are some ways to bring the idea of conscious capitalism to my company if they aren't aligned with the 4 pillars? Or should I look for a company that is already aligned?
So a couple of things. Conscious capitalism can be integrated into an organization, both from a grassroots level and from a high or from a top-down perspective. Sometimes, depending on the corporate culture, it's easier one way or the other. Don't proclaim to know how your corporate culture is, but the way for you to become immersed in it is to seek out a local conscious capitalism chapter. At last count, there was 50 plus of them worldwide, including more than 30 in the United States. I'm not sure where you're located at, but there is probably, if you're in a major metropolitan area, there is definitely a conscious capitalism chapter that exists. If not, check out Conscious Capital Inc., the website. and they'll direct you to some online events to continue to immerse yourself in this. Businesses, leaders get the organization that they deserve. Another quote that I appreciate. If leadership fosters toxic culture, fosters 100% shareholder orientation, and your desire is to have a purpose, the likelihood that that organization will transform is probably slim. The grassroots efforts move the needle in organizations that are already unconsciously conscious in behavior. So if the organization has a very good culture, a loving culture, an empathetic culture, a caring culture that permeates, and you can tend to find some of this, how engaged are they in the philanthropic community? How do employees treat one another as human? He's just human to human, right? We all make business mistakes. We all make mistakes professionally, but I mean, does someone close the door and berate someone for 20 minutes for making an error? If that's the case and that's the culture, it's probably not going to take root there unless there's radical changes. But if it's unconsciously conscious, what we have found in our acquisition of other organizations is companies that are behaving in this manner will adopt it incredibly quickly because it's already in line with their value system, and it just slides right in, and it gives everybody a common vocabulary to move forward on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and push on here, Justin. I want to leave us a little bit of time at the end. So please keep the questions coming. I really do appreciate it, and thank you all, those who have submitted questions thus far. So, okay, that sounds awesome, but why did we decide to adopt it? So at Improving, we want to make a difference. And in order to make a difference, we must be different. We can't chase pure profits. We can't cater exclusively to our shareholders. We have to think about everybody. Now, some, pure business owners this model runs counter, right? Because like I said, when I was in business school, I mean, it was you exist to serve the shareholders, money, 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 money. So it creates a little bit of a paradox of profits, right? Profits are not bad. Profits are the air that the business breathes. You need to have profits in a business in order to continue to operate and continue to do the things and to serve that stakeholder model. If you don't have profits, you can't do that. Now, what conscious capitalism says is profits are best when they're not the higher goals. It is not the primary goal. It's people being happy. It's purpose. It's community. It's responsibility. And it creates that scenario of Southwest Airlines where their profitability takes care of itself because they're driving to a purpose, and the profitability just comes right along with it. Now, for the analysts in the crowd here, this has been pulled directly from the Conscious Capitalism book, but S&P 500 conscious businesses outperform their peers by 12% annually. Now think about that for 20 years. If you're putting 12% growth year over year over year over year, it is incredibly powerful. The other things that conscious capitalism does is marketing costs are much lower. You don't have to be broadcasting from on the radio or on TV if you're engaging your stakeholders. Turnover costs are dramatically reduced because we've got employee engagement, we've got employee satisfaction. And for those of you in leadership roles or in HR roles, know how expensive turnover is and what the hiring costs are, and talent acquisition costs are tremendous. So it's not just good for the world, it's actually conscious business is great for the business. And finally, our commitment is to make improving a great place to work. And the biggest one of those commitments is sharing in the success and accomplishments of the company. Now, James had asked that question earlier about, the distributed ownership. This is right here. This is what we expect our leaders to provide to every single improver. And that sharing in the success and accomplishments, that is the shared ownership model. That is something that we look for. Another thing on here that's not highlighted as much, and I'll touch on in a little bit, is providing creative ways for each of us to learn and grow. And I got to tell you, the pandemic has definitely brought that out of our culture, and it's actually been really neat to watch as a leader to see organic instances of this spring up. So cool. How'd you guys do it? Well, we immediately went old school because not everything can be super innovated. We created a balanced scorecard, and this is that framework of how we are measuring both the health of the business and our approach to conscious capitalism. So we first created our higher purpose, and our purpose is to positively change the perception of the IT professional by cultivating environments of trust for all of our stakeholders. Trust is what motivates us. If you go out to improving.com, the first thing you're going to see on the website is trust changes everything. That's because we believe that. It is the foundation of our business. Our first job every day at Improving is to build trust. Find creative ways to do this. A lot of this is coming on the foundations of the Speed of Trust book by Stephen Covey. There's 13 behaviors that exist inside of this book that we as an organization seek to abide by and inject into our day-to-day operations that have allowed us. I actually believe that this has been one of the key components of our growth, because when there's trust, what happens is speed, right? When you trust people, you're not taking time to question their motives. You're not taking the time to debate their intentions, right? You're just moving fast. And when trust is there, it speeds everything up and it grows upon itself, right? Just like that compounding of conscious business at the 12% of the year, it just keeps rolling forward, forward, forward. So how do we build trust? How do we measure that we build trust? We have this concept at Improving that's called a quick review. And so as I mentioned, Improving is a consulting firm. So what we have done is each one of our consultants throughout our entire organization is reviewed by the client at least once every 6 months to ensure that we are delivering positive service, to ensure that we are building trust, to ensure that we're living into that portion of that client relationship appropriately as an organization and as individuals. The second thing that we do from aligning with our purpose is not only do we take our consultants and review them, we also ask our clients to review us as an organization. And we ask some similar questions. We talk about how we're performing. Are we responsive to needs? It's more than just a standard CSR survey. It's really done with intent to improve and to get better. And we're also measuring trust across our organization, right? If we're going to say that that is our first job every day, if we're going to say that it changes everything, we had better find a bunch of ways to measure it. And we do have more, like I had mentioned. These are just a couple of key performance indicators that I wanted to share with you. So just as a side note, I'm going to get a little section break here in another couple of minutes. So get some questions in if you have them. The next component of conscious capitalism is that stakeholder orientation. This is Improving's stakeholder model, right? We have all of our offices, each of those communities that we serve, our clients, current clients, alumni clients. How are we continuing to serve them? You look at our suppliers. Who are our vendors? You know, we've got vendors in each one of our offices that provide food, provide services. We've got consultants that are what is in effect a vendor to improving. How are we treating them? Are we paying them on time? Are we respecting them? We've got partners. You know, two big partners that we have are Microsoft and Scrum.org. We're very big into the Agile community. How are we partnering with them? Is it a true partnership or is it a one-way street? Are we providing them value beyond picking up the phone when they call? Right? So we kind of look at all of this. And one of the ways that we really show this stakeholder orientation is how we serve the community. Pre-COVID, each one of our offices opens up our doors to professional user groups, nonprofit organizations to come in and use our space to further their mission, to further their goals, their ambitions, their dreams. And each one of our enterprises opens up our space. Like I said, we're a training company. When that space is not being used, that's just it's a wasted asset. By embracing this model, and from a business perspective, by embracing this model, not only are we doing good, but we're increasing brand awareness at very, very little cost to us. Each one of these groups that we host, we provide refreshments, we provide snacks, pizzas, you know, sandwiches, things like that. Come and use our space. We'll feed you guys. Enjoy the space. Be productive. Be the best version of you that you can be. Let us just help with this. We can take care of this. We can eliminate the space problem. I don't know how many people have been part of professional special interest groups or user groups or nonprofits are like, gosh, I wish we had a really cool space to get together that would support us, right? You know, a lot of times people end up at coffee shops or things like that. Here you've got dedicated space, you got great Wi-Fi, and you get refreshments and snacks. Now, obviously, COVID has changed things, which is one of the reasons why this series was created, because we want to be able to connect with our stakeholders and continue to give back. So this is what drove this series. So we're measuring not only the number of groups we impact, but the number of individuals. You know, in these slides are a little bit dated, but this is from 2018. We served 20,000 people. Last year in 2019, we had 24,000 individuals come into our offices, and through March of this year, we had already had 12,000 come through. So we were trending towards 36,000 individuals coming through and leveraging our space this year. So you can see how that would be, how wonderful that is from a marketing and from a business perspective. So I'll take a pause here and hit up my trusty sidekick, Justin, see if we got any questions that have come through.
You answered one of them already about being able to measure increased performance of employees with businesses that are implementing conscious capitalism. So I guess I'll modify it and say, have you had any personal experience with relationships with employees that have been boosted by conscious capitalism? Have you seen anything personal?
Absolutely. And the biggest things that we're seeing is through conscious leadership and the development of the conscious culture. We recently, about a year and a half ago, we acquired an organization out of Atlanta called Innovative Architects. Now, Innovative Architects is a great technology firm, but they were not necessarily embracing the community. The team just wasn't focused on that. And when Improving and Innovative Architects partnered together, and through the integration of these two organizations, we have just seen a blossoming of individuals throughout Atlanta, and their culture has just flourished with the community involvement and engagement that was facilitated through conscious capitalism and conscious leadership. So it's been really it's been amazing to see. I went to oh gosh, this was crazy. So we have these things called town halls, and I went to one of the Atlanta ones in person, And guy, I gotta tell you, it was like one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. It was in this movie theater auditorium, smallish, sat maybe 200 people. They had it about 3/4 of the way filled. And the theme of this town hall was party on the beach or something like that. And to see 125 professionals in flower shorts, sun hats, leaning into the culture, bouncing beach balls like it was a concert at a town hall was amazing. And it was so cool. And it was all because of the biggest part of this is this conscientious leadership and conscious culture that had been developed and then just blossomed. It was really, really impressive. So that's my big personal experience.
All right, and I got one more from this section. You mentioned Southwest already, but are there any other well-known companies that are implementing conscious capitalism that we don't know about or you know about that we haven't heard about?
Absolutely. So Whole Foods. So the Conscious Capitalism book was co-authored by John Mackey and Raj Sisodia. Obviously, John Mackey being the CEO of Whole Foods. It is a fantastic book, and Whole Foods, you can't argue with the business success that Whole Foods has had. And if you look at Whole Foods as an organization and their commitment to their stakeholder model, even with the merge into Amazon, they still remain true to John's vision of what Whole Foods should be. So I would definitely encourage you to take a look at Whole Foods. I mentioned Campbell's. Whole Foods are great stakeholder models. There's a quote of, there's a couple of organizations that have great purpose statements. One of them is Virgin Atlantic, and another one is the Oprah Winfrey. Now, I can't remember if it's the Oprah Winfrey Network or if it's her personal purpose statement off the top of my head, but those are two that really stick out for me. So let's move on to conscious leadership. So, like I had mentioned, good leaders are servants. They serve the purpose of the company. They support people, right? That's really the guts of it. So what are we doing to help support our individuals? Well, we've got a phenomenal internal learning program called Improving You. This is effectively, gosh, it is like a mini college. Legitimately, it's by improvers for improvers. There are 3 semesters a year. There's registration, prerequisites, and over 100 courses that are being delivered internally by improvers to improvers. And it's a great way that we show our dedication and generously share our knowledge internally. Everyone in the organization goes through DISC profile, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but effectively it's your native communication language. And what this does is it gives us some context on how each individual's communicate, right, and what their communication style is. Then we work with strength finders to ensure that we give people the best opportunities to succeed. Now, we're not always perfect with this because we are a business and it's not perfect, but we try to get as close to it as we can. And finally, for some advanced leadership, I want to give a shout out to the Stagen Leadership Academy. Stagen has been transformative personally and in defining my leadership characteristics and what my true purpose is. Additionally, there's a number of leaders within Improving who have gone through either Stagen mainstream programs or some of their side programs. So if you're looking for advanced leadership training, I would definitely give them a look. So how do we measure this? Well, one of the ways we measure this is what you're experiencing right now. Who is truly engaging the community? Who is putting actions into movement, right? Who is doing things? So we measure speaking engagements. In 2019, Improving had 391 speaking engagements. It's more than one a day across all of our enterprises. So we want to be out here talking. We want to be generously sharing our knowledge. That's how we're demonstrating leadership. We speak on all sorts of topics, whether it's technology, business, process, agile, guiding principles, management, across the gamut is what we deliver talks on. So not only are we opening up our space, not only are we inviting people in, but we're also demonstrating leadership by being out in front of this. And that's really a key element of servant leadership. And finally, conscious culture, right? We build trust. Trust changes everything. This is huge for us. So how do we measure this? We look at engagement. We look to see if individuals are engaging in the organization, and we chart this on a quarter by quarter metric about individuals coming into and attending and participating within the organization. So you can see that across the board, we've got several organizations that have had 100% engagement across the entire year, and several that have had quarter over quarter engagements of 100%. We also have another program that's called our Employee Involvement Program. It's our EIP. And what this does is it tracks involvement based off of, gosh, I think there's like 60 different, no, actually it's more than that. It's like 80 different ways an individual can be involved with improving as an improver. So we've got this system going and chart their points, and each one of the enterprises sets aside a significant amount of money to be paid out on quarter over quarter time frame based off of points to the improvers at that location. So for example, Dallas might set aside $15,000, and based off of the involvement and participation of that office, they will pay that out each quarter to individuals. Now, the payout is not, it's more of a side component, but what this really does is we're helping to foster involvement in the organization, foster accountability and responsibility towards career path, and provide a financial reward. So we really look at this in that stakeholder model where we're trying to create a scenario where we've got multiple wins, and we measure this. And this is actually a huge leading indicator for us. And by the way, if you take a look at that chart, you can definitely see the point reporting at the quarter ends, because when the quarter ends, that's when the checks get cut. So everyone kind of does a mad rush to make sure that they've got their points entered in. So that's the final section here. So I'll take a little pause here. Justin, I'm sorry, I forgot to give the question prompt. So are there any questions on that little section?
None at the moment.
Okay. So at this part, like I said, this talk is operational in nature. There's a lot of charts, but what were the results? For us, they've been fantastic. We've received 11 Inc. 500 awards over the past 12 years, 50 plus best places to work awards in every single market that we serve, including a recent one for our Austin enterprise in improving nearshore, won best place to code in Mexico. The revenue has been fantastic. This shows our 2019 revenue of $107 million. This year, our current run rate is right around $150 million. So you can see the exponential growth. And the interesting thing about this chart is in 2015, I kind of see we plateau a little bit there. That was when we reinvigorated around purpose and conscious capitalism, and you can immediately start to see the liftoff that happened after that. So yeah, this all sounds great, Mark. What do I do now? Next 4 steps. Think about the organization's higher purpose. Are you living into it? Does it exist? or is it a platitude mission statement, right? Platitude mission statements, they had their time, in my opinion. I don't think that they have a purpose. And the way that you can get a gut check about whether your mission statement or purpose is really sticking, ask a leader what it is. I can tell you what ours is. The leaders at Improving know exactly what our purpose is, and we live into that. Next thing, identify and understand your organization's external stakeholders and how it works together. Construct a sketch diagram of a stakeholder model. What's it look like? It'll help you visualize it and kind of roll it around and see where the organization is aligned or misaligned with those stakeholders. Think about what your organization measures and how it cultivates its culture, right? Does it even do that? If so, how? And finally, read the book. The book is fantastic. It's a great read. It's a light read, and there's some fantastic stories and analogies and some data. When I send this, this slide deck is going to get circulated, but I do want to add this here. Some individuals on this might be colleagues or things like this. These are a couple of breakout questions for you to reflect upon. If your organization already supports capitalism, how would you implement it? If not, what are some actions that you could take to overcome some resistance, right? If the measurements that you saw were in place, how's it change your future, right? What decisions might have been made differently if these measurements were in place? And then finally, conscious capitalism. There's some great resources here. There's some wonderful conferences. Another book on conscious capital that is similar to conscious capitalism, which is Firms of Endearment by Raj Sisodia. But I would encourage you to take a look at some of these additional resources for extra information as you see fit. Justin, got any late breaking questions?
No questions at the moment. We do have about 12 minutes left if people want to get some last minute questions in.
We'll take a pause. I know that it's so much information. When you start looking at the metrics, it can become so overwhelming from a data perspective. But once you start living into this and seeing these, the famous statement, what matters gets measured, and what gets measured gets changed, right? So you put these things in place to measure the conscientiousness of the business, you will find noticeable change, provided they're in place and leaders are living into them and being held accountable to them, right? You can't just throw a metric out there and be like, hey, we're measuring this, but nobody cares if we follow it or hit the goal or anything like that. So then, organizations and individuals are smart enough to know when it's not relevant. Last check on questions, Justin?
Nope, looks like we're good.
All right. Hey, thank you very much for allowing me to share some knowledge with you. I really appreciate everybody and the great questions. This is an honor for me to be able to do something like this, and I appreciate our team at Improving for putting this together. Justin and crew to handle the technology challenges of something like this. Deeply appreciated and very grateful. Thank you, everybody.